Thank you ever so much for coming on last minute to speak to me. I'm thrilled. We were talking about the film years ago. I mean, it was called Romans back then, and you were just in production when we met for the Pyramid Text, which still remains one of my favorite films. It was such a powerful film. And then you've come back with now, which is called Retaliation. Another outstanding piece of filmmaking. And Geoff, obviously the story starts with you as the screenwriter, and I wanted to ask you first, if I may, really the genesis of it, and why you wanted to tell this story.
For me, it's the story is an individuation. It's about me going into my deep subconscious and bringing out all the things that are obstructing me. These are things that I've experienced when I was a kid. I was sexually abused and groomed as a boy, and that incident remained buried, but created filters that projected a kind of a very difficult life for me. I read a review today of Watch My Back, and someone said it begins with hell. I just thought, oh wow, that's just fantastic. That's really where it does. You go into the hell regions, you bring that stuff out. So for me, writing it was all about individuation. It's about bringing what was unconscious into the conscious. That's why it took 50 years to write, and it was the most difficult thing to sit and write. It was the most difficult thing to take notes on. It just was never ending. It was never ending. It was like Miller Reaper's wall. Every time it was up, it was down. Every time it was back up again, it was down. It was so painful, not just for me, but for Paul and Ludwig, because they've got a great eye for story, and they could see where I needed to part from non-fiction and come into fiction, part from reality and come into an amalgam, and allow the story to find its best shape. So, it was, I write, everything I write comes from a perspective of there's going to be a kid out there like me who's waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat with depression and thinks he can't go on for another day. And I want to write something that will speak to him in a brutally, beautifully honest way, and it will act as an intercession. Someone at the Edinburgh Film Festival called it an intercessionary film. It intercedes in someone's life and says, this is where you are. This person was here as well, and he's come through it. And this is how he's come through it. It's quite a didactic film, but it's painful because in order to individuate it, as Jung says, you have to experience it again. You have to look at it. You have to go through all those emotions. You have to absorb 99% of it. And there's always a danger with individuation that the unconscious grabs you, incarnates you, and drags you back down. This is what Jung says about the danger of individuation. So you would think, it's very easy for people to think you overreact when you write a script, get over yourself. But for me, it's not about a script. It's about bringing the unconscious to consciousness so I can cleanse my filters, so I can live in a beautiful world. The world is only beautiful because our perception is only ugly because our perception, our filters make it so. So this was an act of cleaning that, but it's also an act of cleaning it from the perspective of there must be other people out there like me who are afraid to speak, and I want this to serve them.
And presumably, I mean, has the whole process been healing for you?
Yeah, massively healing. Yeah, I mean, it started with I first wrote about it tentatively in a book called Watch My Back. And then Paul and Ludwig approached me and said, that story in Watch My Back, they called it the handshake story, would you do a film for us based on that? I love their work. And I just said no, because I made up lots of reasons why it wasn't possible, and, get me some money and I might sit down. But I was just scared to look at it. So I thought, I've looked at that. I don't need to look at it again. But these two were like a pin in a crab shell. They wanted to get all the last juicy remnants out. Which was very good for me. Because I was scared of it, I said to my wife, I'm very scared of this film, so I need to write it. So I said to Paul and Ludwig, I'll write it. That was Romans 12:20. So that was great, because it's like, I've done Romans 12:20. Now it's done. Put that to bed, move on. Next lesson, please. And then it was like that triggered another idea, which was Fragile, which looked at it from another aspect, which is the stage play. Romans 12:20 and Fragile became Romans, and that came to me in a meditation. The idea came to me in a meditation, and I still thought, God, it can't be anything else there. But of course, you just hit it from every aspect. You clean it from every angle, so that eventually you're able to see it with an observing eye and be able to observe it without identifying with it. I observe it without emotionally engaging it, so that you can live your life. So it's that idea of getting the damage out, the schema out bit by bit. And that's why the lads are good, because they're so persistent. They've got a great eye for story. So they would say, what about this? What about that? What can we do with that? Orlando was the same. I think we had about 12 hours at his house where he just kept saying, why is he doing this? What's he doing that for? What's he doing with that cudgel? What's he looking for with that cudgel? What's his purpose? It's so painful to go back into that and say, this is what he's looking, but with brutal honesty. You know, and the only way to get this stuff out and to tell a story that's going to have any effect on people at all is to be clinically honest, you know, forensically honest. And with the filmmakers like Paul and Ludwig, you can't be anything else, because they just keep going at it until it comes out. I mean, the last script session me and Paul had, I think we both ill, weren't we, Paul, in BAFTA? We sat there, it was just so painful. And I'm sitting there thinking, I've stood on a nightclub door for nearly 10 years, people trying to kill me. That wasn't as hard as this. It didn't make any sense. But of course, individuation is personally painful. And I know Paul and Ludwig both had to go through that in their own way, in the script writing, certainly on set, which was hugely challenging for them as directors. Every single day, the tension was just pea soup thick. It was so thick. And that's not because of individuals, although it's easy to blame on individuals. It was extremely difficult because of the material. When you bring up material like the metaphysical power of forgiveness, you will meet opposition. And the more powerful the story, the more powerful the opposition. So each of us met that in our own way.
I mean, for you guys, you're then, you know, bringing, you know, the visual aspect to the film. And there are some kind of quite graphic moments in that do make you sit and struggle a little bit. How, and knowing the sensitivity of the material, how did you then want to approach the film from a visual aspect, really? Lud, do you want to just start?
I think our approach was always going to be, let's not shy away from any of the material. Let's not shy away from the brutality. We had to represent this story in an honest way. And we wanted the drama to play out as much as possible in front of the camera. And I think that it was just to keep that approach throughout. And I think it was about keeping it simple, not shooting this in an ostentatious way. We were quite fond of the idea of having quite long takes when necessary. And yeah, we just wanted to protect that honesty that Geoff had written in the script. And I think it's funny because I felt the fear more with the short, because I remember when I got the short, way back when we said to Geoff, look, we read this chapter. I think the chapter didn't even have a name, did it, Geoff? It was just
Yeah.
And we read that chapter, and we had a screening of our first short film, and we approached him and we said, look, we really like this moment. I think it could be a really powerful short film. And we were thinking of writing something, and then you were thinking of going away and doing something. And eventually, when you did it and you sent it to us, I have to admit, it really scared me when I read it. It was completely different to what I thought it was going to be. It was very muscular, very visceral. And I was terrified that we would approach it in the wrong way and not represent the story in the way that it needed to be represented. So feeling that fear, I knew I had to do it, which we did. But we'd spoken so much with Geoff throughout that whole period of making that short and then developing Romans, that when we came to actually shoot it it kind of intuitive how we were going to do it. And the thing that worried me the most at that point was, are we going to find the cast and the team who is going to also support that honesty that we want to represent? Because it's a very, very, we always knew it would be a very polarizing film, and it's a very challenging film. But I remember thinking, if this film has the chance to perhaps speak to some people who have gone through similar situations, it's going to have to be polarizing, and it's going to have to be challenging. It's not going to be for everyone. And I think that was really our approach. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but Paul may want to add, obviously.
Yeah, no, that was pretty. That covered it. Yeah.
And you mentioned Orlando. So Orlando Bloom plays the protagonist Malky, and what we see in the film is he's like a coiled up spring, isn't he? The more we go through the film, and he's about to let loose and unravel, sort of big time. And what I felt watching the film was Orlando really seemed to have an affinity with the script, and I wondered whether you felt the same, working with him, really. Paul, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, he came onto the project, and he saw something in it that he really wanted to play that part. So it was, I think, with this role, it would be difficult to try and convince someone to do it. They really have to see something in it and say, okay, I can see something in here. The writing, Geoff's writing has a lot of truth in it. Going back to what you were saying, Ludwig, when you first got the script, it was really terrifying. That's, I think, because there's a lot of truth in it. And I guess from an actor's perspective, when you get something like that, it can be quite, like a very powerful, there's a lot of subtext there that for an actor that could be really appealing to play something like this.
Yeah.
There's certain issues in the film as well, that which I won't talk about, but there's certain issues in the film that resonated particularly and personally with Orlando. Yeah. And that's why I think, I won't talk about it because it's personal to him, but it's something he talks about quite a lot. But I think that's why he was drawn to it. And that's why I think this film would have probably cost him money, because we were very low budget. And we couldn't pay the kind of fees that he wants, but he saw something in there that I think would have been cleansing for him. So I think for everybody, it would have drawn on some nugget that needed to be looked at. And I know specifically with Orlando, it did. That's when I worked with Ray Winston on the film once, and I said to him, it was a particular scene he'd done in this film, and I said, "Oh, that's amazing. Where did that come from? That's not in the script." And he said, "Oh, it's in the subtext." And he said, "All actors are looking for subtext." And that's what I think Orlando, there was a subtext, even if it wasn't conscious, there was a subtext where he's thinking, this is a chance for me to individuate, to bring something out. And it will go beyond acting, and just be, there's moments in the film where you can see he's not acting. There's just this knotted ball of beautiful rage. It's so raw. Yeah. It is beautiful, and Paul and Ludwig's job was to tease that out, to give him the environment where that could come out fully. And there are moments, probably the best moments in the film, where it's so visceral. He even scared the other actors and scared the crew, because it was like, there's something beautiful about that, because it's unedited.
Yeah.
As you know, society, the world, it's all edited, isn't it? It's perceptions, it's conceptions, it's, it's beliefs. You can't walk around the corner without bumping into an edit. So this kind of cinema allows you to be unedited. I think that's why it's good. And if we're unedited and we have permission to do it on the screen, then it will give other people permission to be unedited with their life a little bit.
Yeah, I think there was with a lot of the other cast that there was something in the role that they resonated with, and that was really good enough for us. And we just thought, when we get there, our job would be to, where the camera goes, the lighting, etc., etc. And if the actors needed support of where they were going, but it was really encouraging for us that they really resonated. Like every main part in the film during the audition, Alex Ferns as well, and Janet.
He cried at the Alex Ferns cried at the audition because he said, "This is me." He was crying. Said, "This is me. This is my life."
And he was the first person to audition for it. And after his first audition, I remember me and Ludwig said, "It's not. We could choose him now. Like, it's not going to get better than that. You know, there is something that he is connected with." We went through others. There were some good ones, but it was, you know, that's the beauty when you make a film where people connect with it. And you know, I think it's, to me, directing is and this is how we approach the film, is how can we at times get out of the way rather than being in the way.
Yeah, letting the actors, you know, work their magic, isn't it, really? And I mean, I have to say, all the performances are outstanding. And you know, they're say a joy to watch, but they are, because they're so authentic and honest, and you know, and believable, aren't they?
It creates a script and a film and a cast like this creates an egregore, like a being that's above and beyond and greater than the sum of its parts. And good directors allow that to happen. They don't enforce their voice. They just create the environment. And that's what Paul and Ludwig, someone said that their directing was invisible. And I'm sure they didn't mean it as a compliment, but to me, it's the highest compliment, because it says there's no ego here. We're just going to let the story tell itself. We're not going to do some weird and wonderful shot. We're just going to let the story pan out. So you create the environment like a corporation or an egregore, and that will bring something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what we had there, you know. And it was, like I said, it was difficult because, you know, people playing outsiders become outsiders. They take it on by osmosis, and that can be difficult to work with on the set. You have to recognize that none of that's personal, you know. And there was misbehavior in some areas from people, but that's also a displacement of spirit. It's not personal. It happens, and the idea then is just to you know, remember that and keep it tight and allow the story to tell, and then fight like mad to keep the integrity of it. Like in the editing, some of the bits that certain people wanted to take out of this film would have killed it, and Paul and Ludwig fought like with their very lives to keep it in. So the integrity of this film is there because of Paul and Ludwig. The film has been made because of Paul and Ludwig. I'm not going to go into detail because it's peripheral, but you know, when you tell a story as beautiful as this, and it's beautiful because of its essential truth, you need people that are prepared to fight for it. And I know this film would not exist now if it wasn't for these two directors. They have such courage and integrity, you know, and I know it's challenging.
And bravery.
Thanks, Geoff. And likewise as well. I think
it's all about the writing, really, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah. We've had this back and forth. Yeah. You know, it's all about the directing. But there was one question I wanted to ask, actually, that just occurred to me. It was something about the subtext. You know, when we made the short film, Romans 12:20, and then you said, Geoff, that was it. It was put to bed. And then when you came to write Romans, did you know the subtext that was going to go into it before you wrote it, or was it once you approached the writing, all this subtext come out?
I was struggling with my stomach. So that's the Dantian. That's the what they call the elixir field. My stomach I had lots of problems with my stomach, and I communicated with this semi-autonomous thought form in my stomach. This is literal. And I said, I'm aware you're there and you're making noise. What do you want? And he says, I want to be out of you. I want eternity out of you. This is the words. And I just said, where do you want? And he said, you know where. And I said, you need to say it. And he said, I want you to do a feature film. I want you to do Romans. I want to be placed in there. I want to come out of you and I want to go into there. And I said, okay, I'll sit down and I'll do it. I spoke to my agent. I said, I'm going to write this film, but it'd be nice to get somebody to sponsor it, you know, a producer to put a bit of money in. I'm going to write it anyway. And it never happens in film, but I had a meeting with James, the producer, and I said, got this idea. It's based on the short. The caveat is that it's got to be the same directors. That's the only caveat. Have you got some money? And he said, yeah. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. Nobody says yeah. They always want you to write everything for nothing. So he gave me a little bit of money, and I sat and wrote it in about 4 or 5 weeks. And as soon as they got it, they said, we want to go A-list on this. I mean, that was an early draft. Wasn't the film we ended up with, but the essence was there already. So I knew something was coming out, Paul, because it had its own voice, it had its own energy, and it did clear it out. And that made room for other things as well, because obviously all the clearing isn't just done in the filmmaking. It's done when you do talks like this. It's done when you sit at Edinburgh with an audience and take questions. It's done when you write articles about it. Each time you tell it, each time you tell the story, something else comes out. So you don't really know what you know until you tell others what you know. That's why filmmaking is so good, because it gives you the opportunity to know what you know.
But did you know that you were going to put some of the subtext in there before writing it? Because, like, for example, the whole the relationship between the mother and what did you know? Were you bringing that to the script, or did you think, right, I've got to write this?
I had nothing to do with it, to be honest, Paul. I just sat down and it came out, and then you and Ludwig helped me eke out the other bits. There's bits that you're most sensitive about, the bits about talking about the parental influence, about familial denial, about societal denial, about dissonance. Was this my fault? Because it's been implied. In the play, the character goes, I was 11, I was 11, I was 11, I was 11, I was fucking 11. What do you mean, was it my fault? I was 11. There's just that dissonance that needs to be cleared. So my job is to hear the signal of the soul, intuition, and then just sit down and be a vessel for it, and then it comes out. And then work with people that I trust, who aren't going to take it off into a cinematic direction or in an ostentatious direction. Just someone that goes, let's have a look at this, let's sit on this, So for me, I don't know what I'm going to write until I write it. And then it's as much a surprise to me as anybody else. But it does pick up all my flavors, and it picks up my story, but it also picks up the elements of every story that's ever been told to me. So it is very much an amalgam of lots of stories. It's not a literal biography.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other thing is that religion plays a very strong part in the film, doesn't it? It's almost like we're surrounded by religion all the time, which envelops us, the audience, into... It kind of gives us a feeling like what it's like for Malky, because that religion, it's surrounding him and it's engulfing him, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wondered what you wanted to say about, all of you really, about sort of the religious aspects and the part that had to play.
For me, character thinks he's been abandoned by the priest. He thinks he's been abandoned. Who is the kind of an emblem of the church of God. He thinks he's abandoned by his mom. He feels abandoned by himself, but he's actually what he's really feeling is he's been abandoned by God, but he doesn't want to voice that. He's scared to tell his mom that I think you've abandoned me. And she hasn't, she's just afraid, but he's afraid to tell his mom. So there's no way with thousands of years of conditioning, he's going to call on God and say, you abandoned me. But that's what Paul, the maverick priest, encourages him to do. Put your complaint in front of God, and God will come back at you, and he'll say, I didn't abandon you, because I can't abandon you, because I'm omniscient, I'm omnipresent, I'm omniscient. But did you abandon you? And of course, Marquee realizes that at some level he did abandon himself, because all of his violence, all of his displacement is acts of self-abandonment. It's because he can't articulate it. So it's really what the character wants to say is that God doesn't exist. If he did, he abandoned me. But what he realizes through the storytelling is that he's lost his connection with God, but God is always present, and that God actually saved him. And when he delivered the truth to the priest, that's what, if your enemy hungers, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him drink. That means if you're hungry, if your enemy is lacking truth, if he's lacking faith, give it to him. So when he says to the priest, you abused me, that's him feeding the priest. That's him filling the, the priest has obviously rationalized or tried to suppress what he did. So what he's doing is actually from St. Paul, Romans 12:20, he's feeding the priest and he's given the priest drink. That feed and drink is an allegory for truth and faith. And when he does that, he is freed, because then the priest falls away and has to face his own reciprocity. And Malky's able to drift away and begin the process of healing, or what the Buddhists call find refuge. So we find repair. So his next story would be a film about repair or repentance. So it starts up with abandonment of God, and then it ends up with unification with God again.
Yeah, and I think what, again, with the whole kind of arc of the film, and what's great about your films is that then it's not predictable.
Yeah, no, if it's predictable, you're in trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Was that something that attracted you guys as well, and that was important that you were, because there is, without wanting to give too much away, there is sort of a self-redemptive story here, isn't there? Because this guy clearly hates himself, but he learns a way to find peace.
Yeah, I think the empathy for us was key in him finding himself, but I think when we say he found himself at the end, I think it's the very beginning of the journey. And I think that's what really appealed to us. We didn't want to wrap it up and say, well, this happened, he chose this path, and then this is what happened to his abuser, and everything is now over. I think it was, for me, the very, very beginning of a new journey, perhaps very similar to when he was a child and this event happened to him and it took him on a different path. Perhaps this event that happened to him as an adult also now perhaps has the power to take him onto a different positive path. And I think that's what really appealed to me.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, we've obviously talked about Orlando Bloom. He is a marquee name as independent filmmakers. How important is it to have a marquee name attached to your project, not only to get funding, but maybe to attract other, recognizable names? If for other filmmakers wanting to set out and make a film, should that be a priority, Paul?
Well, yes, and I would say yes and no. Obviously, having a name attached is key to getting attention. The thing with Orlando is that when we met him, I think it was on the first, I think we all met him, didn't we? All three of us, we went up. Sorry?
We first met him, well, when we first spoke to him.
Yes.
And then we went up.
That's right. Yeah, it was instantly, like we instantly knew that he was right for the part. Like he was there for the right reasons. He really saw something in the script, and so that was really nice. There was one thing that we were told actually, that with Geoff's script, and this is just generally speaking, I hear that there's a lack of good scripts that are that are in circulation, and the thing with if you've got a good script and a good team, you can go out to A-listers. That's something that Geoff, you've got a great story about going out to Ray Winstone initially, and they said that you wouldn't even be able to afford his lunch. But there's this the advice that we got is, if you've got a really rock solid script and it's done for the right reasons, you can go quite big, even bigger, as big as you want. People who have made it, who want to do artistic films, who want to prove themselves, who want to get back into the craft, that the reason why they wanted to act in the first place. So there is that. So that's why we felt really confident going with this particular script, because we just knew that there was a lot of truth in it and there was a lot of subtext, and it was just something that actors would really want to do. But yeah, and so I don't know if that was a long-winded answer, but
I think,
and getting Orlando just it just raised it, and everyone started taking interest in it.
Yeah, I was just going to add something just briefly in that it obviously it helps when you have a big name, I think, but with this particular film and this, specifically this film, very much so, my biggest concern was, is an actor going to go there? And when our casting director suggested Orlando Bloom, I think that we were like, wow, is he gonna want to go there? I mean, is he going to read the script and then just say, no, thank you? He's an actor who's been in two of the biggest franchises in the world. So there was that. And then they sent us some of his material. And I think it was one of his films I saw, it was Zulu, this crime drama with Forrest Whitaker. And he was great in that. And I remember we thought, okay, this is really interesting. Let's have a chat with him. And I remember the three of us spoke before the call, and we said, let's speak and see how we feel about whether he's going to do, because the three of us said the casting is going to be a choice between the three of us. It was kind of sort of the thing that we thought was really important. And he really understood the story just so much more than I expected. The character, the subtext, everything. But the thing that was most impressive was that he wanted to protect the honesty. And that happened throughout that happened from before, that happened during the shoot. And I remember once he had a conversation, is if we drop the ball on the honesty, if we try to water this down, we're going to fail. And I was like, oh my God, yes. Okay. So we just knew it had to be him.
I think the good thing as well, when he came on board, was that we all had a journey, Geoff, you and myself, through writing it. It was we got to that final stage and it was quite exhausting. As Geoff, you said that when we were working, it was just, there were days that we were just completely shattered and exhausted. And then it was as if Orlando kind of gave that extra strength once he came on board, because we thought no one really can push us now any more than we've been pushed or we've been pushing each other. And then when he came on board, he was like, right, that's it, get up, we need to do this and we need to protect the honesty and we need to do, he brought that energy to the mix. And I think we really needed that at that point.
Extremely professional. He really did the homework.
Yeah, I think we were as prepared as we could be. And I just think had someone had come on and not treated it with that honesty and the integrity and the sensitivity, I think it would have been really difficult.
But like you said, Paul, we had that from everyone, from Janet Montgomery,
yes,
and Reed to Charlie Creed Miles. Everyone felt like we were all there to serve the story.
Yeah,
there's only one part that's lacking, I think, and that's where we cast Orlando as me. My wife is, how narcissistic. You're doing a biography about your life, so who can we get? Well, I don't know. Who can I get? What about Orlando Bloom? Orlando Bloom?
Fantastic.
I've not let my wife anywhere near him, honestly. She's never even spoke to him. So I'm not allowing you anywhere near him. This is what she thinks handsome is.
Let me kind of round the interview off really by asking what you feel is the biggest achievement from making the film, and what have you taken away from being working on it and creating it, really. So I'll go for Paul, if you can start.
That's when you said that, there's so many things came to my mind, so I'll pick one of them. It's trusting your intuition when you work on something. There was a lot of talk about what the film was and the subtext in it, but even to this day, when people say, what did you know that this meant this, and it still surprises me, because there were things in it that just felt right to do, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't put. And then when we've done screenings, the Q&As afterwards, we've been in Edinburgh Film Festival where we screened it, and people have started commenting on the film, and we have been in situations where I've kind of looked at Geoff and Lud, and I've said, yeah, we did that, but I don't know why. Like, I can't really articulate it. I've got to think about this a bit more. So yeah, it's just going with the passion and what feels right, and the love.
Yeah, exactly. Lud, what will you take away with you from making the film?
Like Paul, I had lots of things, but I think the thing that struck me the most was I was placed back during the shoot, and it was very challenging. And the thing that I will take away most from that whole experience was the connection I had with Geoff and Paul, because we've always been a close team, and I think we really bonded even closer. You know, in these high stressed situations where you're dealing with new emotions and new challenges, it can sometimes go either way. But I left that experience really thankful for the relationship that I have with these two, as friends, but also as, you know, as collaborators as well. And that's I'm thankful for that.
Thank you. And Jen?
Yeah, the subtext just keeps on giving. You know, the subtext, even now, you know, if I'm writing stuff now, I'm still learning about the subtext. It's never ending. It's infinite. It's like in a way, it's like the idea is a seed, like an oak, like an acorn seed, that you put into the ground, and has the potential to be 200 foot high and produce another million acorns. So that becomes another seed in itself. So that, you know, the unfolding just continues. Each, like the film creates a seed, that creates another oak, that creates another lot of seeds. So the subtext keeps on giving. I keep learning, but you couldn't write that. You couldn't write the subtext. It comes through your willingness to be vulnerable and to be naked, your willingness to be brutally honest. So for me, all the things the lads said, you know, how tight we got, how the energy that, you know, that kind of pushed some people away, drew us very close together. And the fact that it is a completed film, you know, and it didn't end with the last shot. We had to fight to keep the handshake in. We had to fight to keep the scene with the little girl at the ending. There were forces, very powerful forces, who were prepared to bury the film rather than have those scenes in. But the film wouldn't be the film without those scenes, because they are so integral. They are so loaded with subtext. It's very, very beautiful. And Ludwig and Paul particularly, and Orlando, fought to keep those in. And we had help as well. At one point, Katy Perry added her influence to keep a certain scene in. And because I said to my kids, there's a particular person in the film who wants to take a scene out and it will kill the film, but I don't know what God is going to do to keep that scene in, because Lud couldn't make him keep it in, Paul couldn't make him keep it in, Orlando couldn't make him keep it in. So he sent Katy Perry, and she just said, "Oh, keep it in." And the guy goes, "Oh, all right then." And it was like, I said to my kids, "Ever guess who God sent to keep that scene in the film?" Katy Perry. The most famous woman in the world. It's amazing. The miracles in this film they've just been never ending. We've had loads in that, but we had to fight for the integrity right till it was locked. Then when it went out there, it wasn't likely to change, but obviously the name of the film was changed, which wasn't our choice. I'm not really worried about that. It won't affect the overall message. But for me, it's the fact that there was something inside me that I didn't want to look at, that I've been running away from for my whole adult life. And I've brought it out and I've made it into something beautiful with the help of all of this incredible collaborative team. Someone said to me the other day, "Oh, film is a director's medium," and it just isn't. Film is a collaborative, absolutely unequivocally a collaborative medium. And I'm not just saying that because it sounds good. You know, I couldn't do what I do without them. They couldn't do what they do without me. The actors couldn't do what they do. The cast, it is so collaborative. And that's where the vulnerability comes in, because you're bringing a piece of your soul out and it's caked in coal, and you've got to get that diamond out, and you need people around you who aren't clumsy surgeons. You need people who are sensitive to it. Now, I tell people that this film has a soul, so treat the script with care. And they look at me like I've grown a second head, like I've become pretentious. But it's absolutely true. A film, a script, you know, the direction, everything is a living entity. It's a semi-autonomous thought form that needs great care, needs to be taken of it. And that, so I think, to sum up, Paul and Ludwig took tremendous care of it, right beyond the point where there came a point where I was no longer a part of it. And Paul and Ludwig were having to fight over editing, fight over pieces that were being left in. You know, they were fighting the fight long after my part of it was finished. So I did a book called Notes from the Factory Floor, and I wrote about the process. And I said, this film would not live without these two men. It just wouldn't live without them, because they've had to give everything they've got for it. And I'm only presuming they did that because they love me.
Yes. It's been how long? 20 years almost.
Yeah, a long time, yeah. They keep forcing me to write things I don't want to write, Claire. I can't go there again. What, again? We've done this.
Get the whip out.
Yeah.
Well, what you've done and continue to do is make fantastic films, and your collaboration it speaks for itself. So I wish you the best of luck with the release, and I hope lots of people get to see it. We shall try our best from here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.